Honest J. Nowak. Oh yeah.
A pleasure to meet y'all at last, and welcome back to Honest J. Nowak and the Legacy of Supers. So, Legacy of Supers, of course, is still going to be going strong throughout the rest of this entire month, but I'd say here, October is going to be a pretty big time, a pretty big deal for me in general. So, of course, let me just say real quick that these kinds of villains that I'm going to be talking about soon are not necessarily part of Detective Comics or Marvel, but instead, they pretty much come from the DreamWorks series of films. And the first one I'm going to be talking about here is Megamind. That's right. The 2010 film Megamind, starring Will Ferrell, of course, was a pretty big deal at the time. It's been already 10 years, but there's still a lot of people talking about it, in the same way that a lot of people still talk about franchises like Despicable Me, How to Train Your Dragon, Shrek films, and plenty of others during some of the old days of DreamWorks films. Of course, DreamWorks was a high-end competitor to Disney and Pixar and a few others out there at the time, and there eventually came Blue Sky Studios as well. But let's not forget that there have been plenty of others out there that have tried to compete, and some of which have failed, because Pixar was one of the only ones to survive the CGI craze, especially with their release of Toy Story in '95 and a sequel in 1999. And then eventually they started recreating certain franchises as well as making their own, like Monsters Inc., Finding Nemo, and Cars. But of course, DreamWorks' Megamind in general was a pretty good film out there. Not just because of the inclusion of Will Ferrell, but also because it tried to elaborate on another take on based on the superhero versus supervillain sort of phenomenon that has been around for a long time. Of course, Superman was one of the earliest examples ever known, but when it comes to Megamind, it pretty much plays out in a much more different way than we anticipated. The character of Megamind was first thought to be a villain after landing in a prison and growing up in juvenile detention for some time. Megamind sought out to pretty much get revenge on humanity, as well as a person known as Metro Man, who, of course, was birthed in a wealthy home. Of course, as the years passed by, there were a lot of conflicts that came on between the two, until finally one day, the film would show Metro Man's sudden death, with a skeleton bursting out of an exploding building and landing right in front of them. Megamind, of course, was joyful yet shocked about how easily Metro Man had died from an explosion. And then, of course, there was a certain pathway to redemption that took place. That was one thing I liked about the film, the fact that anyone could change their ways. It just takes time, practice, patience, and plenty of work, including some blood, sweat, and tears. It may not be for everybody ever existent, because some people might have already paid the price, even if it costed their lives, but I'd just say that even though Megamind's not real, everyone simply deserves a pathway to redemption. Some forgiveness, some respect as well. But in general, I will say that the film Megamind was pretty awesome for what it was. It gave us a new contrast and a new outlook on how the superhero versus supervillain plotline can take place in any film. But of course, Megamind pretty much just went from supervillain to superhero really quickly after discovering a new arch nemesis attempting to lay waste to the city in the film, called Titan. And you know what? I might as well start talking about Titan tomorrow, though. But if you want to see more, go down on my channel. Make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side. Oh, and that reminds me, Megamind has a minion, too. A fish in a fish bowl on top of some sort of robotic armor.